We all know the feeling. You're scrolling through social media, watching people curate their perfect lives, their perfect opinions, their perfect brands. Everyone seems to have figured out exactly who they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to say, and how they're supposed to think. And somewhere deep down, you feel this exhausting weight of keeping up with all the right answers, all the right behaviors, all the ways you're supposed to be good. But here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. What if trying to be a good person is exactly what's keeping you fake? This isn't some edgy contrarian take for shock value. This is about something much more fundamental, something that the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche understood over a century ago. We've built our entire sense of self around moral categories that were never ours to begin with. We've inherited a script about what's right and wrong, good and bad, acceptable and unacceptable, and we spend our lives performing these roles instead of ever discovering who we actually are underneath all the performance. Think about your last Instagram post, your last job interview, your last first date. How much of what you said and did was authentically you, and how much was you calculating what the other person wanted to hear? If you're honest, probably more calculation than authenticity. And that's not because you're a bad person. It's because we've all been trained to believe that being good, according to society's standards, is more important than being real according to our own nature. Nietzsche called this trap slave morality, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. We've become slaves to other people's definitions of what makes a worthy human being. We chase their approval, fear their judgment, and slowly disappear into a performance of what we think they want us to be. Meanwhile, our authentic selves, the dangerous, unpredictable, beautifully flawed reality of who we are, gets buried deeper and deeper. But here's where it gets interesting, and where most people get Nietzsche completely wrong. When he talked about going beyond good and evil, he wasn't advocating for becoming a sociopath or throwing morality out the window. He was pointing towards something much more revolutionary, the idea that we can create our own values instead of just inheriting them. Let me ask you this. Why do you believe what you believe? Not the surface reasons, but the real reasons. Keep asking why, and eventually you'll hit a wall where there's no answer except because that's what I was taught. Or because that's what everyone thinks. That moment of hitting the wall, that's where your authentic journey begins. Most of us are terrified of that wall because it represents the collapse of everything we thought we knew about ourselves. It's like quicksand under what felt like solid ground. But Nietzsche saw this collapse as liberation. Instead of being bound by inherited moral categories, what if you could author your own life according to your own deepest values? This is what I mean by dangerously authentic. It's dangerous because authentic people are unpredictable. They can't be controlled through social pressure because they've stopped deriving their sense of self-worth from external validation. They've done the terrifying work of figuring out what they actually stand for, not what they're supposed to stand for. Look at anyone who's built genuine influence in the world. The artists, entrepreneurs, thinkers, and leaders you actually respect. They all share this quality. They've refused to be bound by other people's definitions of what they should be. They've embraced what Nietzsche called self-creation, the ongoing project of becoming who you are rather than who you're supposed to be. But let's be practical about this because philosophy without application is just intellectual masturbation. How do you actually start this process of authentic self-creation? It begins with what I call values archaeology. You have to dig beneath all the inherited beliefs to find your core drives. Start by making a list of everything you think you should value. Everything you've been taught is important. Then ask yourself, if no one would ever know, if there were no social consequences at all, what would you actually choose? The gap between those two lists is where your authentic self is hiding. Next comes the authenticity audit. Look at the major areas of your life, your career, your relationships, your creative expression, your daily routines. In each area, ask yourself, am I doing this because it genuinely aligns with who I am, or because it's what I think I'm supposed to do? The honest answers might be uncomfortable, but discomfort is the price of growth. Here's where most people get stuck. They think authenticity means sharing every random thought and feeling without any filter. That's not authenticity. That's just poor impulse control. Real authenticity is about aligning your actions with your deepest values, even when it's inconvenient or unpopular. This means you might have to disappoint some people. You might have to quit the job that looks good on paper but kills your soul. You might have to end relationships that are based on who you're pretending to be rather than who you are. You might have to express opinions that make people uncomfortable or pursue goals that seem weird to others. This is the social cost of authenticity, and it's why most people never take this path. Being authentic means accepting that not everyone will like you, and in our hyper-connected world, that feels terrifying. We've been conditioned to believe that universal approval is possible and desirable, but it's actually the enemy of authentic living. Nietzsche understood this lonely aspect of self-creation. He wrote about the higher men who had to create their own values and live by their own standards, often misunderstood by the masses who preferred the comfort of inherited beliefs. But he also understood that this loneliness was the price of genuine freedom and genuine influence. Because here's what happens when you commit to this path. You start attracting people who are drawn to your authenticity rather than your performance. You build relationships based on who you actually are rather than who you think you should be. Your work becomes an expression of your real values rather than a calculated attempt to please everyone. This doesn't happen overnight. Authenticity isn't a destination, it's a practice. Every day, you have opportunities to choose between the comfortable lie of performance and the uncomfortable truth of being yourself. Every conversation, every decision, every post is a chance to practice what Nietzsche called self-overcoming. The ongoing process of becoming more yourself. Start small if you need to. Express one unpopular opinion thoughtfully. Say no to something you'd normally do out of obligation. Share something vulnerable but meaningful. Have that honest conversation you've been avoiding. Create something that represents your true perspective, even if you're not sure anyone else will get it. The compound effect of these small acts of authenticity is extraordinary. Over time, you build what I call authenticity momentum. Each authentic choice makes the next one easier. You start to trust your own judgment more than others' approval. You develop the psychological muscles needed to withstand criticism and misunderstanding. This is how you build genuine influence in a fake world. Not by trying to appeal to everyone, but by being so authentically yourself that the right people are magnetically drawn to you. Not by performing goodness, but by living according to your own carefully chosen values. Not by avoiding controversy, but by standing for something meaningful, even when it's unpopular. Nietzsche had a vision for what humans could become if we moved beyond inherited morality towards self-created meaning. He called it the Übermensch, not a superior race, but superior individuals who had done the work of authentic self-creation. People who lived as works of art, who created value instead of just consuming it, who inspired others to break free from conformity. Look around at the world right now. We're living through what feels like a collapse of shared values, shared truths, shared reality. Traditional institutions are losing their authority. Old certainties are crumbling. And everyone seems to be making up their own rules. This might feel chaotic and frightening, but Nietzsche would have seen it as an opportunity. This is exactly the moment when authentic individuals can emerge and create new possibilities. When the old scripts stop working, there's space for people who've done the work of self-creation to step forward and offer something real. So here's my challenge to you. What would you do if you weren't afraid of being judged? What would you create if you didn't need anyone's permission? What would you stand for if you knew that some people would disagree with you? Start there, because that's where your dangerous authenticity lives. The world doesn't need another person trying to be what they think everyone else wants. The world needs you to be courageously, unapologetically, dangerously yourself. Because at the end of the day, that's the only person you can actually be. Everything else is just performance. And the beautiful irony is this. When you stop trying to please everyone, you become infinitely more interesting to the people who matter. When you stop performing goodness and start living authentically, you inspire others to do the same. When you become dangerously authentic, you don't just change your own life, you give permission for others to change theirs.